abortive ventures. In November 2015, Chris announced that he would be setting up a shop on Zazzle.com. He mentioned it again half a year later in June 2016. No progress was made, and to this day, Chris has never opened a Zazzle shop. Why he dragged his feet so much is unknown. Zazzle takes care of manufacturing and shipping, and there are no startup costs. All he would have to do is take some Sonichu drawings and upload them. Because Chris is lazy, that's why. In October 2017, amid being the subject of interviews by Merriweather, Sachumo, and Copper Cab, Chris announced that he was open to being a guest on more interviews for payment. Although he didn't specify his going rate, Merriweather mentioned that Chris had asked him for $200. He has since given interviews for free, taking the bend out of his potential scheme. Customers and their reasons for buying. That's a good point. A piece of valuable internet culture, a potential buyer on Chris's comics. While many who follow Chris refuse to give him money and shun those who do, buyers seem to regard Chris memorabilia as pieces of internet culture that might become valuable over time. A February 29 video in which a customer unboxed a Sonichu issue 0 comic printed from Lulu attracted over 100,000 views, and many commentators expressed a desire to buy for themselves. Ironically, the resulting bump in Chris's Patreon gave him so many orders to fulfill that he crashed into slumber and simply ignored the backlog of orders. For anyone else, that would seem almost like Christmas coming early this year, but no. Apparently, that's just too much for Chris to ask or to handle. Potential customers mull over buying Chris's comics on Patreon. Let's just see this. For $20, that's pretty good. A piece of internet history. I don't think about it that way, but yes, I guess that's a good conversation starter. Dude, I'd give $20 for that. I have a feeling these will be worth a lot someday. 100 years, he will be an abnormal legend. I agree. $20. Okay, right, that's... the Red Sterling McBay says, all that costs is $20. I'm gonna get my piece of Chris Tree before he goes up to the great big Quickville in the sky. I'm not even being mean either. Every well-known artist's works becomes more valuable once they die. Well, yes, that's true, but we'll see exactly how much when the time comes. Ad revenue. When he was uploading his Sonichu comic pages to the Wikipedia in 2009, the thought of monetizing his webcomic didn't cross his mind. People who had been annoying, nay, harassing him with advertising he didn't approve of. Yet, when he attempted to replace these offensive ads with ads of his own, he simply put some random adverts on his webpage without actually signing any sort of advertisement contract. The ads didn't make him any money. There are several advertising programs that allow individual people to put ads of their personal pages and make money out of them. Some of these programs are even specifically geared toward webcomic artists. Many webcomics have a donation box where readers can donate money to the artist via PayPal or similar services. In 2016, Chris monetized his YouTube channel and added a support button, ostensibly to accept donations for Sonichu projects. Even though he didn't want to work on that, no surprise there, and for a year, YouTube simply became another platform for which he could beg for money. It took a while for Chris to start to try drawing on camera in live drawing streams, and even then he hasn't demonstrated it too often, and has done an extremely poor job of it. He simply sits in front of his PS4 camera, which is hard-coded to only record in flipped mirror mode, and is positioned so that viewers see an upside-down video set at a dizzying angle. Schedule slip. Most webcomics have a set schedule. Some update weekly, some many times a week, some daily. Some webcomics update whether the hell the artists get inspired enough to draw a comic, and probably reserve a whole form for people who whine about lack of updates. Most webcomic artists that update the comic 3 times a week consider that schedule very demanding, and webcomics that update daily usually generate revenue of some sort. Ads, donations, print versions, merchandise, what have you, allowing the artists treat their comics like a full-day job. These are called self-sufficient webcomics, for examples Penny Arcade, XKCD, questionable content. Chris has thoroughly embraced the point of view that the comic shouldn't have a set schedule and inspiration doesn't have a deadline. How wrong he is. While also promising us that the comic would be updated daily. On the 14th of November 2009, Chris promised that the comic would be updated daily, and he managed to fulfill this promise for a while. By the end of Sonic 2 number 10, Chris was already placing author substitutes in the story, telling people to quit whining about the lack of updates. This is obviously not a question of punctuality, but hypocrisy. Chris would avoid a lot of drama if he just admitted that there's no set schedule at all whatsoever. If one does consider this a question of punctuality, it doesn't look too good. Chris also tends to update in spurts in attempt to make up for missed days. This can range anywhere from 3 to 20 pages a time. Most professional web cartoonists have a buffer of guest comics so that they can avoid this sort of thing, but the thought of doing so has apparently never entered Chris's autistic mind, which more or less demonstrates that Chris doesn't take, any... He doesn't take the idea of what industry he's wanting to enter into anything serious or anything genuine whatsoever. The same mindset also pervades every other aspect of his business, namely that Chris will procrastinate on shipping orders. A key example is how he almost fucked up the Sonic Totem sale. He received $1,500 for it, immediately wasted much of his profit on bling and failed to ship it to the buyer on time, saying that he had run out of money to pay for mailing it, and only got around to having his mother scrounge up the cash to do so after the buyer filed a PayPal dispute. He also lost his Etsy shop as a direct result of his poor work ethic. I wouldn't even know what it's like to be Chris at this point, because I could not think of anything more lazy in my life. Pipe dreams. When do you want Nintendo and Sega to talk to me to evolve Sonic 2 and roast you more realistically? Now! Chris demanding that multinational corporations take orders from a nobody. Yeah, that's true. Chris has had numerous aspirations to work in creative industries. However, he knows next to nothing about them. He would not begin to realize the enormous implications about what it means to work in those businesses, such as meeting deadlines from editors, being hounded and harassed by members of staff, probably most likely more editors. There's a great manga series, I think it's called Bakuman. It's about the creative team that basically gave us Death Note, about two guys who decide they want to almost drop out of school and work to become manga artists, whilst, they have friends around them who want to become voice actresses, and there's a lot of very fierce competition, especially in Japan, in regards to the manga business. There's an equally amount of very tough love, especially when it comes to US publications. Marvel and DC have deadlines that almost ostensibly would make any sort of attempt at socializing in the real world almost difficult. EA are possibly the most notorious about this because their practices are not entirely legal by laws or even conditions set up by union traders, well, trade unionists. One of the best examples out there is being of the notorious developmental hell history of the video game LA Noire, in which there was a team in Australia who were working 7 days a week, were not getting paid to work on Sundays, worked anything between 10 to 14 hours a day, and were hideously underpaid for their work. I'm saying these things, ladies and gentlemen, because if Chris had any desire whatsoever to know about how serious he is, then he would have done. He would have understood exactly the serious implications, despite the fact that, Chris's criminal history, his homophobic remarks, his racist remarks, his misogyny, and his work ethic that is beyond disgraceful, in my opinion. So, how on earth is any publication going to possibly accept it? What could they find in Sonic 2 that is not only legally a minefield of problems, but also one that is associated with something that's going to give them a very bad name. However, for reasons best known to himself, he elects not to find out how these industries actually work. There you go. Which is quite strange. One would assume that a person seeking a career in the industries would at least take some effort to find out how said industries work. Like that short spiel I just gave. I found out myself, and I was almost horrified to know about the world that I was getting myself into. And that hasn't necessarily devolved me from wanting to get back into it, but trust me, there are some very, very sketchy things about the industry, like the animation industry I was going to get myself into, because, well, there's, well, very, very notorious instances within the industry. Like, that's a topic for another day anyway, but that's a very good point in itself. Official publication. In the Sonichu Chronicles and Chris's resume, it's revealed that Chris is under the impression that his art just isn't good enough, but professional quality. Okay. Compared to what, Chris? And then he aspires to get his comics and video game businesses. This resume reveals his widely varied skills, which both pens and crayons, and his desire to work as an artist for a professional comic company such as RV Comics or Marvel, creating his Sonichu comics. There is no word on whether or not he actually submitted anything to these companies, or if they replied. They never would, if they did. Unfortunately for Chris, the publishing industry doesn't work this way, exactly, especially not in the case of original creations. In the case of original work, the publishers expect complete works to be submitted to them, usually through an agent. An agent's job is to separate the wheat from the chaff, and find the correct publisher for the work, taking a small percentage of the eventual profit for their reward. Exactly. If the publishers take unsolicited submissions, they have to sift through a gigantic backlog, often called a slush pile, of submissions of highly varying quality, most of which would end up rejected multiple times before there will be a publisher with the right market in mind and the right publication schedule to allow the publication deal to go forward. The whole process can take years in the case of just a single work or a single issue of Sonichu. Even PAL Comics, for example, would struggle to work out what the appeal or what the demographic is. And PAL Comics is notorious for making adult-oriented comics for the internet. And they have a very notorious reputation themselves, but even they would think twice before allowing Chris to put his own work, especially in comparison to the quality of their work anyway. So, no, that would... No, I don't know if or not the thought ever crossed Chris's mind about that, but no, not even they would be willing to accept this. If comic book publishers have salaried artists, they usually need to have a portfolio of previous work, usually work that has already been published commercially, or if the comic house is particularly lenient, and most big names aren't, there has to be evidence of a successfully self-published high-quality comic. And even in this case, these artists usually only work on characters and plot lines that come from inside the house. It can take time before the artist is in any position to present their own ideas for comics, or use their original characters. Even if he were able to stick in a company for a long time, he'd still need to improve his communication skills a lot to, an editor, an artist, etc., etc. If the Sonichu Chronicles PowerPoint and various phone conversations are of any indication, he's unable to persuade his superiors that his ideas are worth working on. Mostly, and this is where the very serious matter of Chris's stories, as far as a writer is concerned, is brought into play. Because no authentic publishing house, no matter which one you go to, whether it's Archie or PAL Comics, they'll simply just look at a page that is just a wall of text, and they realize that this isn't a comic book at all. It's basically just a book with some drawings in of it of basically ripped off characters. And even if it was meant as a parody that Chris is inevitably keep on making, he does not seem to, cross out any cross-referencing to characters that originally existed and refusing to scratch out names. Not to mention other characters he blatantly stole, like Simon Chew. Meanwhile, you would have to find a very specific... I mean, I'll give you guys a very specific example. Let me see. I know that... one second. Let me just... I need to find... There's a very specific thing I need to find. I think it's something... I think it's called something like the Insidious Alan Moore, but I'll have to look at it very, very specific, like a very specific sort of thing. Let's see if I can just get this into a full image. Hopefully there isn't anything right here. Well, okay, that's quite a funny one, but it's not quite what I'm after. Oh, okay, I guess I'll try this one again. Hopefully there's like a full image of this. Ah, here it is. Please take into consideration this, for example, ladies and gentlemen. This right here is a parody of the works of Alan Moore. I can't necessarily find the issue that is in color, but there is a comic out there that parodies the life of Alan Moore, utilizing his style in his 1988 work. I think it was like 88 or 87 work, Watchmen. And note the dialogue and the depiction of Alan Moore. He seems to me only gentlemanly thing to do. This is in reference to the League of Gentlemen, also worked on by Alan Moore. Of course, there are some critical questions involved. One as the bride just fallen over, as it were. If so, is 4 perhaps a tribute to the bride's choice of impact or bridal footwear? Right. If this is indeed the case, then I should think it wise in a reversal of Cinderella archetype to endeavour to remove metaphorical bride footwear prior to raising her up. In the interest of miming the risk of, I know he comes from Northampton, but I can't do the voice. At least, I think Alan Moore comes from Northampton. In the interest of miming the risk of some recurrent bridal tumble or oof. And it's basically just Alan Moore bored out of his mind trying to... I don't even know what he's trying to do. Is he trying to make a cigarette out of this, I think? The point is that why this is parody and Sonichu isn't is that this mocks in some very slight way Alan Moore's style of putting so much text on screen that he's just talking nonsense. This is basically just white noise to the audience. But there are some parts of Watchmen where there's so much to dig in that it's kind of like going through a novel in many ways. But the fact is that this is the depiction of... I think they took the art style from Alan Moore's comic book From Hell, which is about Jack the Ripper. And they just made it look as if Alan Moore has just had a stroke. And the way they designed of just him looking confused, his hair is completely grown all over the place, and basically the editors are just going right, just agreeing with Alan Moore instinctively because they know this is the sort of thing that he's done previously but has sold. But then again, this is the author perhaps just pointing out how kind of ridiculous his mindset is, but he goes with it. Now that works as parody because it's slightly poking fun of the fact of Alan Moore's creative process and the things that have actually managed to make its way into publication. Chris doesn't do anything quite like that. He doesn't make any subtle jokes. He doesn't... If Sonichu was a parody, it would be Scary Movie 5. So unfunny, devoid of anything really clever or anything like that. It's just white noise and then the end of the credits. That's what Solitude is like. It's just white noise. Unlike the Wicked Alan Moore or something. I think that's what it's called anyway. But you see how that works in many ways. If the Solitude Chronicles PowerPoint and various phone conversations are any indication, he's unable to persuade his superiors that his ideas are worth working on. In short, Chris is deluded if he thinks that any company, whatever, will just pick him up and tell him to work on Solitude comics. Even if Chris does get it, there's also the problem with scheduling. Among other things, most comics are worked on far in advance, thus allowing for any changes concerning a book, such as plot problems, character availability, changes, or even cancellations. Even so, many of them maintain a certain schedule, either monthly or bi-monthly. In fact, even as we are speaking right now, you know how Marvel plan out the Marvel Cinematic Universe by saying something like, I don't know, WandaVision Season 10 will probably already be in. But then again, something like Season 2 will probably already be in works. It will probably... They might be done the last episode of Season 2 of WandaVision if they decide to bring it back. And they'll probably be going over the drafts right now as we speak. They are plotting out movies far beyond Phase 4 of the cinematic universe, possibly into, let's say, 5 or 6, depending how far they want to make or what else they can write about. They'll probably be making stuff like an actual Apocalypse movie for the X-Men when they bring them into the MCU. Probably a Galactus issue where they have, well, by that time they introduce the Fantastic Four into the universe. Maybe a Silver Surfer solo film. Goodness knows what else. But the fact is that they plot these things so that all the pieces fall into place. Marvel are very well organized because they know fine well that their movies are going to hit big because they're marvels of themselves, if you pardon the pun. Chris it's whenever Chris feels like he's going to do it. Not at any expense whatever. There's probably even talks of maybe the Civil War 2 being made, as far as we know. And that one will probably also maybe star Chris Evans, hopefully. I don't know, I loved Captain America Civil War, I must be honest. Even if Chris does get in, there's also the problem with scheduling. Okay, bi-monthly, sometimes quarterly. Very rarely do comics go bi-weekly, one every 2 weeks, though weekly series have been more common, though infrequently. DC Comics, for example, experimented with the weekly format in the 1980s with Action Comics Weekly, an anthology which bombed and put the title on hiatus for a few months, returning to its normal Action Comics title and monthly format. 20 years later, DC has churned out a number of weekly series including 52, Countdown, Trinity, and more recently, the New 52, Future's End. All of these comics, ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you right now, absolutely suck. And I've read them myself. I've had conversations with the guy likes of Linkara before. Linkara absolutely knows, even for someone who's never entered the industry himself, he knows far more. He's forgotten probably more about comic books than I'll probably ever know. And I would recommend, if you want to get an example of why, you might want to check these out anyway. I know they're kind of like older videos, but they're something nonetheless. Chris, however, has no schedule. Oh, and also Linkara at least puts out one new video every single week, and he's been doing this for years. His schedule consists of whenever he has the inspiration to work. That doesn't cut it. Chris went with that alone. He would have a release schedule that would rival Rob Liefeld and Valve. Then again, Rob Liefeld is not great either. And where Liefeld, for the most part, could get away with it because he owned his company at one point, I think this is meant to be like Image Comics, I think, and people have gotten him to actually do the work. If Chris pulled this kind of stunt, he'd be out of the streets so fast his head would spin. Chris's understanding of copyright is a chapter in itself. Publishers want primarily original works, because securing the necessary rights to a publishing derivative works is often difficult or impossible. If you want like a more elaborative example, in my screenwriter's Bible, it tells you under like there's a whole a section on law when it comes to copyright stuff, in terms of what you can own and what you cannot own. You cannot, for example, own an idea. That's one of the biggest things they tell you from the word go. The whole point, like, even when I was having my professional creative classes in university, the objects of these classes is to understand the ins and outs of, like, if you're going to be, under suspicion of libel, and they're also designed to give you, legal advice against corporations that defy union conditions, or labor conditions, I should say. Publishers want original works because securing the necessary rights to publish derivative works is often difficult or impossible. Chris has even resisted attempts to educate himself in this regard. That's something you almost have to do if you're going to do this. On the 14th of August 2017, Chris uploaded a video where he updated the true and loyal fan base of his progress on Sonichu number 13, which he has renumbered as Sonichu 12-9, which is something that's pretty much unheard of in the comic industry, because it makes absolutely no sense why anyone would do that. He states that he decided to change the focus of the comic, instead being a crossover between the Sonichu gang and the Planet Dolan crew. It would instead be a fan fiction devoted to his pony avatar, Nightstar. Throughout the video, he mentions how he not only wants the comic to be a piece of fan fiction. Well, how on earth can fan fiction be canon in a publicized comic book that Chris wants it to be? But now he also wants it to be canon to My Little Pony. That will never ever happen, where he himself would voice Nightstar. Of course, Chris doesn't seem to realize that the creators of the show can't just simply pick up his ideas because, as stated earlier, it may be led to an accusation of idea theft. Games and merchandise. Chris could approach Sega, in theory, and Nintendo, also in theory, and ask them to make Sonichu games, comics, and merchandise. This plan would also be doomed to failure from the very start, because no media companies want unsolicited ideas from the public. There are several reasons for this. Get out the popcorn, ladies and gentlemen, because I've known from what I've been told and what I've learned about this. First, it takes effort to sift through the idea piles, and they can't give an equal amount on thought of the countless ideas fans send them. While game companies may listen to their fans, this is also debatable, they usually just want to know if the game is ripe for something that they've been planning to do. For example, no doubt a big part of the reason why the newer Fire Emblem games got worldwide release was that the fans of Marth and Roy from Super Smash Bros. Melee were wondering aloud, why the hell isn't Nintendo releasing these games outside of Japan? They most certainly don't have the capability of starting a whole new game project just because someone asks. If the game companies respond by saying Chris had, as he himself so eloquently put it out, rocks in his head, then you probably wouldn't get a slice of their precious time for making a second impression. Simply put, Chris thinks that even when the companies aren't busy with other projects, they still have time to think of his grandiose ideas and those things only. Just to give you guys another little friendly example of how you can take this further, take the game Overwatch. Now, Overwatch I've been playing for years, but even I will admit there are certain things about the game seriously needs to be updated about, and things that seriously need to be changed. For example, it's nearly been a whole year now since we've last gotten a new character, and you would say that development for anything new, like a new map or new characters, or the return of, maps like Paris or Horizon Lunar Colony, they have been in decline for years, and Chris and Blizzard have been adding in really stupid limitations like hero pools, map pools, that on the whole were projects that were doomed to failure because nobody asked for them and they abandoned the project almost from the very beginning. What I'm trying to say is that when people say that we want Blizzard to do something that's going to change the game, or at least add something that's a bit more striking, something that's more encouraging to, older players and maybe more casual players who might be picking up the game for the first time, there are numerous things that I've suggested, even to people when we've been playing the game. Like, for example, turn the hybrid maps like Blizzard World, Kings Row, Numbani into maybe assault maps. Maybe expand on the on locations and add just different variations of maps so that at least there's something different to check out. It doesn't seem particularly a very difficult really thing to do if you just have a bit of a generalized idea of what you think a good map would look like and how it differentiates from something else. That's just one thing. The second thing is that new characters being involved in the game has become, well, let's put it in one word, diminishing over the last several over the years, because I think it was like in 2017 they added 3 new characters, and in 2016 they added 3 new characters. So 3. Then in 2018 I think they also added 3. 2019 they added 2 new characters, and then in 2020 they've added 1 new character. Now the idea is that a lot of people have said that it's because they're working on developments for Overwatch 2, and despite the fact that Blizzard has also stated that they have, ideas for 6 new characters to be added into the game, but we've heard news like that for nearly a year and a half now, and we've yet to really see anything out of this. And that's an also important thing that Blizzard needs to kind of, I imagine, understand about how fans work, is that if they keep fans in the dark far too long about something, I mean, when was the last time we've really got any interesting sort of like developer updates from the man Jeff himself? There's many things that just people want answers to, like we want more stuff that's going to invest more interest, because if Overwatch 2 doesn't deliver on this, then what is Blizzard gonna do? Because if Blizzard wants, to keep, their Overwatch titles in games, interesting at all, they ought to start by, in my opinion, adding more things that might actually make wanted people play the game, not by silly restrictions that wouldn't even be tolerated in a FIFA title. Second, there is an age-old problem in a litigious society. A fan writes to the company and says, "I have this cool idea." The company says, "Thanks, but no thanks." One of the in-house writers comes up with that exactly the same idea by accident, and boom, you have a fan who's suing you for idea theft. And even if that lawsuit will usually go nowhere, it wastes perfectly usable time, energy, and most of all money that could be used for more fruitful ventures. A famous example is British novelist Terry Pratchett, who used to post in his Usenet fan group until one of the fans was convinced Terry had stolen his ideas. Therefore, most media houses will just say that they will not take any ideas from the public. The game industry is not an exception. This fact has been pointed out to Chris numerous times, and at least twice by real Nintendo representatives, as evidenced by the letters he has read in the captain's logs. Unfortunately, Chris misinterpreted all of this. Another thing that Chris disregards is the fact that writing games takes a lot of effort. In Thomas Edison's words, getting things done is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Many good ideas don't get implemented. No one is going to invest energy in developing an idea if they don't know if the idea can be implemented. Game companies may be willing to negotiate, for example, a deal to use their properties, such as characters, in games developed by third parties, but those proposals are usually backed up by real companies, actual creative teams of developers, and serious complete kit plans for games, if not outright working prototypes already. Even in the case the properties are tacked on the prototype later on. The prototypes are usually fully developed so they can be used without those properties. If the plans fall through, example Star Fox Adventures began as a game that was completely unrelated to Star Fox universe, but Nintendo felt the game was better with the SF characters. Theoretically, it would be possible, though extraordinarily unlikely, for Sega and Nintendo to cooperate enough to make a game featuring Sonic/Pikachu hybrid named Sonichu. They would not, however, need any input from Chris or even his permission to combine characters that they want from their own. Think about it. Of course, the idea of releasing it cross-platform for Sony consoles remains yet another absurd and feathered dream on the part of Chris. In the Sonichu Chronicles, he gives Shigeru Miyamoto permission to use the cover to his hand-drawn Nintendo Power magazine as the inevitable cover for when the game is created, even though it's several years old, and in fact even worse than Chris's current skill at art. And we'll go over these basically in due time, because right now, ladies and gentlemen, what I want everyone to take away from this article, if there is anything to disclose entirely, is that Chris goes into things with his heart in his breast, but fortunately he left his brain at home. And as you probably may have worked out, this leads to the fact that should Chris really get anything published, he doesn't think things through because of his work ethic and also the reputation he has round his neck. But that being said, however, if Chris really did want to decide to take himself seriously, then it might be already far too late. Because, as I pointed out earlier, his Patreons are now down to just $100 a month. I am honestly going to say it might not be long before we get the second part of the financial crisis, because I reckon it won't be long before time starts catching up to Chris if he doesn't apply himself seriously soon. I've said this before, but it will become more obvious, especially if he wants to dedicate all his time to preaching about the dimensional merge. If that's what he wants to spend his time doing rather than, making himself successful, then that's his business. I'll get along with trying to make myself successful regardless. So anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video of Chris and business. Please make sure to leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys thought of the article for yourself. Please also make sure to like and subscribe to get daily notifications when my videos come out. And I hope to love you guys again in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye for now.